Someone had to say it. Welcome back to Someone Had to Say It. On this episode, I had my friend and author of the novel Unorthodox Love back on the show. Heidi Shertok and I spoke with our guest Zach Silverman, also known as ZE Silver, who's creating content on TikTok and Substack since October 7th, educating others on Israeli history, politics, and Jewish peoplehood. We talked about his site where Jewish writers and creators showcase their stories, why it's so important right now, and a little bit of Israel's history along the way. We hope you enjoy, and as always, don't forget to follow Someone Had to Say It on Spotify or Apple, rate and review us, and come back for more interesting guests and stories. Thank you for listening. Enjoy. Welcome back, everyone, to Someone Had to Say It. It's been a while. We've taken a little break, and now we're back. And I have my favorite co-host back with me, Heidi Shertok. Thank you for being here.
Hello. Oh, so good to see you and to be back. Thank you for having me.
Of course. And we have a guest with us, as you know, Zach Silver. He's going to talk to us about his platform for Jewish voices, Jewish stories. And I met him through Heidi. Thank you so much, by the way. And tell us, I guess, tell our listeners who you are, what you do, what you're trying to do. And then we'll kind of just go from there.
Yeah. One, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. So funny enough, real quick, my quote unquote pseudonym, which is actually related to like my pen name, which kind of goes into the story, is ZE Silver. But my full name is Zach Silverman, and I'm here in Arizona. And basically what I have been trying to build really since May or so is a platform called Gam Vagam Media. Gam Vagam is Hebrew that kind of like doesn't have a necessarily complete translation, but really means this and also that. And really the kind of ethos behind it is to ensure that people feel the ability to hold two things at the same time. I think it's very easy and far more, I would say, popular to kind of take one side and say this is everything there is. And so I wanted to really create a space in which the mission of the content or the media platform was based on the idea that you can actually hold two things to be true at the same time. And what I am currently looking to launch is something called Sifriya. So since May, I can't believe that it's actually kind of coming up on a year since I started the Substack. But really since May of 2024, I have been publishing articles and a few podcasts as well on politics. And recently I jumped into Jewish issues, I would say, more kind of like expository type of writing. And the reason being is because kind of similar to like Tablet Magazine, I would say that there's really an interesting cross section around what does it mean to have a place where people discuss the inner workings of the Jewish community and the Jewish people. While that's a very like small niche area, I think one of the things that I've been really focused on is how to actually tell our story to non-Jews, because what October 7th has really shown me ever since is that clearly we have not done a good job of really telling ourselves and our people our story, let alone telling the world. And I wanted to create a place where we could do that. And what Sifriya is this shift into narrative writing and real storytelling, because and I'll go into it later on as we go into it, which is that clearly one of the other things that I learned from October 7th is that right now Jews are really not going to be elevated in the cultural zeitgeist and in cultural spaces and in artistic spaces. And to be very clear, what I mean by that is authentic Jewish voices that speak to the Jewish story. There will certainly be always Jewish artists and Jews in the culture, but what does it really mean when we want to tell our story that is true?
Yeah.
Now that there are so many new misconceptions that have been adopted by greater society. And so I want Sifriya to be a place where authentic Jewish voices can have a complete platform to be themselves.
And it's interesting that we have you on today, which is, I think, kind of amazing, because today has been one of the hardest days for us as a Jewish community. And we talked about it before we started recording, is the whole Biba's family bodies being released. Although just a few minutes ago, I saw that they realized one of the bodies is not the boy, the 4-year-old that they
What?
released,
Oh,
which
I
goes.
thought it was Shiri. Was it Shiri?
No, it was the 4-year-old,
Oh,
That would be
Ariel.
Ariel.
Yeah,
oh.
Ariel. Yeah. So,
Wait, I
and
don't understand. They had, so it
they
was,
put in somebody else's body, basically.
oh
So
no.
as we're already going through what we as a community have been going through for 15, 16 months now, today was especially hard because we felt this family, they were all hostages, right? And the youngest, 9 months old, his brother was 4 years old. So it's so pertinent to what we're discussing, having our voices, having our stories, because I was talking to someone not too long ago, and she's also Jewish, and she said, I realized that if I posted something about our suffering, our struggle, October 7th, whatever was going on my business page, and it was like once in a while, maybe once a month, what's going on with the hostages, what's going on with Israel, that was fine. The moment I started posting a little bit too much, that's like too much Jewish content, too much, I unfollow, can't watch this is way too much. And she started losing a lot of followers, as we all have. And this has become our daily life now. How much can I share? Should I share? Should I say any? Should I not? Should I stick to what it is that my job, so to speak, is, right? For Heidi, it's your books and writing, or non-Jews, are they going to start unfollowing us? So I think it is amazing that you've created this platform, and I'm all for it. But at any point, did you ever think, I'm going to get not just backlash, but am I going to lose followers? Am I going to get hate? Am I going to get just negative feedback? How is this going to affect me? Did that matter? Or was this something you were prepared and ready for and didn't care?
Well, if anything, I mean, I built my platform on being truly and authentically Jewish and
Mhm.
Zionist.
Mhm.
And I think it's helpful to know how it came to be because funny enough, I've tried to be a content creator like multiple times.
No.
And it has never worked out. And then basically what happened was I've been writing a fantasy book for the last few years.
Mm.
And it was very specifically analogous, really uh, very almost an allegory of the Israel-Palestine conflict. But it was so much more deeper than that. It had to do with themes of identity, with religion, with history and how it impacts us. There was really, the goal of it was to show how we are all victims of this conflict.
Right.
And I had been writing it for about a year without, frankly, I hadn't even thought about writing a book. I just was unemployed and I needed something creative to do. And so I started building a world, and then a world started, led to a story, and a story led to a book. And
Yeah.
I learned about the publishing industry, and I learned how hard it was to get an agent even. And so I started to research more about what did it mean to self-publish. And one of the things
Mhm.
that it had recommended was to start marketing your book even before it's finished.
Right. Into groups and communities and
Correct.
yeah.
And so I
Mhm.
went on to Book Talk and I followed all these people. And, prior to October 7th, I mean, one of the things that I really prided myself on was being a good ally. And just like so many other industries, the publishing industry is very white, very male dominated.
Right.
And so I wanted to put my support behind that, even though, again, Jews operate in this weird space, but nonetheless, I acknowledged where I was. And so I wanted to use my platform in order to do this. And then what happened was October 7th, and literally on October 8th, the entire Book Talk community was like, we need to support Palestinian authors. Israel's committing a genocide. And I reached out to some people who I hadn't known for very long, but I had certainly built somewhat of a relationship with over the previous 6 months, and was just like, hey, like, I'm Jewish. This is really complicated. I don't know how much you know about this. I'm happy to literally do the unpaid labor in order to educate you. And I got nothing back. And so I realized what was going on. And so I deleted every single video I published. It wasn't a lot, but I definitely deleted a lot. And I was like, and I went on to private, and I was like, I don't know what's going to happen now. And then I saw one particular video that just really ruffled me the wrong way. And it was about 2-3 weeks later, and I was like, I have to say something. So I stitched this video. It went viral, and I was like, oh, I didn't realize that people would like this. This is a nice, I got that nice dopamine like cycle. And so I made more. And so I really started to build this platform off of being educating Jews and what does it mean to really be Jewish, because I have such a wealth of experience and diversity when it comes to the Jewish experience. And so I offered myself in order to do that. And so to me, the most authentic thing is to be as Jewish as possible. And again, it's just so clear that we as a people, and I include myself in this, that we do not know our own story and our own history. And so there are so many incredible stories out there that describe the beautiful mosaic that is the Jewish people, and that is Israel and the history of Israel. And I want to
and the truth.
Exactly. And not one from somebody who is like, and this is not to hate on Reform Jews by any means, but I think that there is something to be said about coming at it from a place of believing in traditional Judaism, even if I don't necessarily follow traditional Judaism myself, and really coming at it from a place that says there is a 3,000-year history. And that is why we have survived, is because we hold ourselves to it. And so it is high time at this point to go back to it, whatever that means in terms of assimilation and so on. But these are the stories that we need to tell about who we are without anybody diminishing it in any way, which we know would happen when we start to get into the executive suites. And, Heidi and I spoke, when we first introduced one another to each other, she told me about some of the things that, she's been going through. And I just didn't want to do that to anybody.
Right. Well, and I think the thing too about, sorry, Heidi, I was just going to say that making these videos and making them interesting, educational, and funny, in your case, I think it's not just for us and educate ourselves, but it's also for the non-Jewish community, because most of the context about the Jewish life, Israel history, the real information, the truth is being drowned out by this pro-Palestinian agenda, which I don't like that word, because none of us are anti-Palestinian.
No, it's an anti-Israel movement. And I actually wrote an article like that on my Substack.
See, and that's the thing. That's what I keep seeing. And they keep putting that out there, that we're baby killers and we're this and we want to wipe them all out. Although Trump did say something today, I want to wipe them all out. But no Jew has ever said, well, at least nobody that I've ever known in my life, that let's just wipe them all out. We want to get rid of them. We're against Palestinians. We just want peace. We just want to live and coexist in the place that we have been in, since, this is our ancestral homeland, which brings me to the whole Zionist word, right? That's become a slur, which is literally, I even knew growing up in Soviet Russia, that all Zionists meant was that Israel exists, it always existed, and this is our homeland, and that we believe in our ancestral homeland. Obviously, there's a lot more to it, but it's been spun out of control, and now it means we want to kill everybody. So which, I don't even know where that brings me to, because this is what we deal with on a daily basis,
Well,
trying to
it's not just
debunk.
that though, because it's not just that they're trying to lie about the war. They're literally trying to erase us. And there
Right.
has been a coordinated, intentional campaign to erase us from history and to rewrite our story. It is something around that Israel never existed, and that the Palestinians are the real Jews because their DNA is connected to that of the ancient Canaanites. They want to say that King David was never a real person, so therefore our story isn't there. We have no connection because we've been gone from the land for 2,000 years. I mean, just on and on, that we're all Europeans. I mean, it is a
Well,
consistent.
but then also that real Jews are black too. Remember that whole narrative that
Yeah,
Kanye,
of
Nikianan,
course, yeah.
that they're
So
the
he's
real
right.
I will
Hebrews.
say that there are, the
Right.
Ethiopian Jews,
Of
which is
course.
legit. But yeah, I mean, like I went to the doctor a while back, and I was like, people think that, right, exactly, that Jews are these white colonizers, and I'm like, well, let's go back, a couple thousand years ago, and like, why are we white? First of all, and not all of us are white, first of all, but because we were kicked out of our homeland, and some of us emigrated to Europe, and some of us went to North Africa and stuff, so we were spread out all over the world, even I think some in China. Aren't there the
Oh
Jews?
yeah. Hmm.
Oh yeah.
In
Yeah,
Shanghai.
right,
India,
Shanghai.
all
So
over.
people get this idea that Jews are basically myopic, and that's it. And
Even or like
Woody
um,
Allen.
Woody Allen, and
Yeah.
that's the thing. So here's why going back to Sifriya to me is actually so important, because what we have done as a Jewish community, and again, this is not like to fault anybody, it's just how it happened. It's less intentional, but more just a natural course of history, that we allowed for our story to be concocted under this idea of Fiddler on the Roof, or the neurotic,
Yeah.
New York Jew or whatever it is. And we never went out to talk about Sephardic Jews. We never went out to talk about the Jews of Iran. We never went to talk about, we talked all the time about the Holocaust, which
Right.
we obviously should, but we never talked about the Inquisition and what did that mean for the Jewish people. And we can create educational videos, and we can create, write as many articles as we want. But in my opinion, I think that the most salient things, the things that last and have the most impact, are stories. We all know the best book we've ever read, or in my case, listened to. We all remember the most incredible TV shows and the most incredible movies that we've watched, and the impact that it has on our perspective of the world. And so, one of the things that I really care deeply about, or because I care deeply about high quality storytelling, is that the main difference that I have seen as somebody who, watches a lot of television and a lot of movies and comes at it with a critical eye, the way that many probably come at it with books, as well as I do. But I look at it, and I've come to realize that the best stories are told by those who are given the time, space, and freedom to tell their story that is authentic to them. And it is when the executives come in and say, no, it's got to be like this, or it's got to be like that, or we can't
Yeah.
have this. The more that non-storytellers, non-creatives get involved in the creative process, the lower the quality is, versus the executives who recognize, you know what, I have no idea what I'm talking about. So you know what?
Right.
You're the creative one. You do all of the creative things you want. And look, if it sucks, then and nobody likes it, you can't blame me. But if it's awesome and amazing, then fantastic. It's a win-win on their part in that front. And so for me, it's a matter of, can I create a space where people who are Jewish in all spaces tell their story in the most authentic ways, where they have someone who believes in creating that space for them, as opposed to finding out at the very end when they're ready to get published, or they're ready to get their script bought, or anything of the sort, oh, well, actually, can you tone
We
down
got
the
it.
Jewishness a little bit?
Right. We got to change it. We got to adjust it a little. Yeah. And I think what you mean also, and I want to reiterate that it, the story by stories, you mean actual real stories that have happened to them, their life history, whatever it is. When you were talking about film,
Or made up, or a fantasy story, or a sci-fi, or just a normal fiction story. If somebody wants to tell
right,
their story through,
right,
whether it's through written word or if they have a song or whatever it is, they should have a place where they feel like that they're going to be published and promoted and shared with
right,
all of the energy and excitement of somebody who believes that these stories and this type of art should be spread far and wide.
right. And when
And
you're
it's
talking about, sorry, Heidi, I keep
go ahead.
I was just gonna say that when we think about those, the best movies we've ever seen, at least for me, the best books we've ever read, they were always based on some form of true life events, right? So of course they're embellished, they're whatever changed, but to me, reading about something that has actually happened in the past, some historically true novel, whatever, to me that's like the best book ever, best story. But also, like you said, other stories that are fiction and things that are created fantasy, I think, and that's where, well, Heidi, go ahead. I'll go back to being an ally and how we've all always been an ally of everyone, BLM and everything else, and then we find ourselves completely lost on our own. So but go ahead, Heidi. I'll go back to
Well,
that.
I was just saying one of the reasons why I love Zach's initiatives to free us so much is because, especially since we don't have that space, like he was saying,
Yeah,
especially post October 7th, there have been like countless cases where Jewish authors that I know personally have been told it's like what we call soft boycotting, where it's nothing as concrete as somebody saying you can't come because you're Jewish, but rather have been bookstores who have canceled book events, but it was very abstract. They wouldn't say why. And then, but of course, there was one case, her name is author Michelle Mars, where it was very public and they were not ashamed of it. It was this annual, I think, romance con, where romance authors come to, one of those annual conventions, and they put on their social media, um, we are banning this author. I think they called her out even by name because of her Zionist views. And like we were saying earlier, Zionist has somehow equals, I don't know, like Nazi even, right? Like they've
right,
totally inverted the truth. And especially like in the UK, especially right now, they say, I've heard that editors are afraid to even go to these acquisition meetings with titles of Jewish authors. And it doesn't even if the book and the story has nothing at all to do with Israel, just because being Jewish is associated with being Zionist, even though there are, of course, a portion of Jews who are not. And
Or ironically, they keep telling us that anti-Semitism is not, or anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism, and yet now
of
Jews are
course, we know
simply
that's not true.
ostracized and excommunicated for nothing but being Jewish because of the assumption that we are Zionist.
I love how after October 7th, everybody was like, pro Palestine, this and this and this and whatever. And then they're like, Happy Hanukkah. As if like, because they're like, Jews
they're
have
not,
no relationship to the land. And then they're like, Happy
they
Hanukkah.
don't eat that. That's what, to me, a lot of times I'll just be like, how dumb can someone be to not put two and two together? It's like you said, they're separating Israel from Jews in general. Yes, there's Jews living in Israel, but the Jews outside of Israel, they're okay and they're fine. It's not that we hate them, it's the Zionist Jews in Israel. And to me, it's just like, how are you? Okay, you're
Well,
celebrating
actually,
Happy
I don't
Hanukkah.
necessarily
but
think
wait,
it's.
wait,
I
wait.
take responsibility for that.
So let me just finish my thought, what I was trying to say.
Oh,
That
sorry.
way I can't remember my thought. But
Sorry,
yes,
it paused, and so then
then
that's what happened. My apologies.
the Hanukkah part versus, Happy Hanukkah to you, but yet we hate all Jews or all Zionists. And I was just going to share a funny story, which is not really funny. on that topic. But I remember being at a Thanksgiving dinner with a former client who became a friend, because I ended up becoming friends with all of my matchmaking clients, which is, it's not a good thing, but it happened.
It's not a good thing.
It's not, because a lot of those clients I'm finding are not, they're anti-Semites. I mean, what else can you call them, right?
No.
So, because I worked with everyone before, I worked with Jews, with non-Jews, I worked with Muslims, I work with every culture. If I could help them, I helped them. So I was invited to the man's house who she was dating. I introduced her to him. He was Persian. She was originally, her family's from Lebanon. But see, I've had a lot of friends who are Persian, who are Arab, who are whatever. That has never really been an issue. But that particular night, that Thanksgiving, it was a huge party at their house, and her daughters were there. And we no longer speak, by the way. So I don't think that she listens to anything. And if she does, maybe she'll learn something. But I remember her daughters who are very proud. Their father's Palestinian, and they're very proud of who they are, which is great. And I remember one of them telling me, I broke up with my Jewish boyfriend. So they all wanted to date Jewish men. I have a lot of clients even now who are not Jewish, but want to date Jewish men. Because why? Because, like we know, the stereotype, Jewish men are good providers, Jewish men are good fathers, Jewish men are good family men. The Jewish men are the best. Okay.
They are.
Right.
Yep.
They are.
You said it, not me.
But we're not good enough to support when we need them, right? So she said, we ended up breaking up, and I said, oh, I'm so sorry, what happened, blah blah blah. And she said, well, I think he felt the pressure from his family, his mom, to marry a Jewish woman. I'm like, well, I understand that. I have 2 Jewish kids. And she said, well, and it wasn't just that, she wasn't like you, she was a Zionist.
Ooh.
And I remember for a second, I was holding my plate. It was like a buffet style, right? I'm holding my plate, and I kind of for a second turned to see where's my husband, where are my kids, where's my mom, my dad were there. And I was like, okay, in my head, I'm thinking, one, do I make a scene right here? There's like 50 some people here. Do I educate her and tell her what it means? Do I just walk away? What do I do? Right. And so I put my plate down and I said, well, we're all Zionists. And she went, well, you know what I mean. No, I don't know what you mean. Please elaborate. So then she goes into the whole thing, you know how Zionists are, and they believe what they believe. And there was never a really clear explanation of what a Zionist in her eye is. So I said, well, let me explain to you what a Zionist is. And so I went into the whole spiel, and then I see people gathering around, and my husband's like, oh, crap. And he kind of pulls me aside. He's like, let's do this later. I'm like, no, I'm not doing this later. I'm doing this right fucking now.
Good for you, Julia. Good
Let's
job.
just say this is constant in a matchmaking world when you work with non-Jewish community. So that I don't really know where I was going with that, but that was part of what we were just talking about.
I was just saying how there was once a person, I still don't know if it was a man or a woman, I forgot whatever, but there's a group of us, the Authors Against Anti-Semitism, and we have a chat, and somebody's like, oh no, here we go, another list of banned Zionist authors. And so what I like to do, I'm very into social experiments. I just think they're very fun. So, but also important sometimes. So what I've been doing is I message somebody who's obviously anti-Semitic or anti-Zionist, whatever. And I say, hey, I'd like to have a very honest, peaceful discussion. Are you willing to talk to me and just, be peaceful and hear each other out? And the person said, yes. And so right away, I'm like, well, that's different. And it took literally 3 hours. But it's very unusual because I've tried to talk to so many people. So this was like 1 out of 100. But the person admitted that they didn't really know what they were talking about, that this was, a 19-year-old who was like, home and thought they were doing the right thing, basically. And like had no idea about any of the facts about Israel. Had no idea that 22% of the citizens, for example, are Arabs. Sorry about my dog barking. I specifically
We like that.
from 6 to 7. But
Wait, you told your dog from 6 to 7,
yes,
do
and
not
I
bark.
took him to the dog park, and I'm like, okay, we're doing this, so you're gonna be good later, right? And he's like, okay, like whatever.
That's funny.
Can't trust him. But there's the
No.
CAT under the deck that he loves. It's just it's a long story. They've got history those two. But yeah, so
Yeah.
I did, through talking to this person who was open-minded, as was I tried to hear this person out, and we had a back and forth, but the person eventually did remove the list, like everything, that whole account they did put down. So that was one
Wow.
rare moment where if somebody's willing to really hear another person out, you can actually, accomplish things and actually do good things. And I did suggest, hey, maybe you could try, instead of protesting against, Israelis on campus, maybe you could try to form a club where you are more inclusive and try to bring everyone together rather than, tear people apart. And the person was like, yeah, maybe I'll do that. So.
Well, and when it comes to education, there's kind of, I think, what the stories that you both stated were something that really represents why Sifriya is something that I'm so excited about, which is on the almost what our real story is, what our actual story is. What does it mean to be Zionist? And I don't think that we did a good enough job as American Jews to our American Jewish community really actually instilling a sense of Zionism. What does it mean? Because we were sensitive to some of the more icky spots of it, but also really telling the full history of it, that it's not just about the 20th century and winning in 1948 or settling in Palestine or whatever it is, but rather that it actually does go back to Hanukkah. And what does it mean to celebrate Hanukkah? So basically, like, the reason why I think that nobody really knows that Hanukkah is a Zionist story is because Jews are not told that it's a Zionist story, or that the Jewish and Zionist piece are one and the same. Because we tell American Jewish children that Hanukkah is about the miracle of the oil lasting 8 nights. But we don't, and we, sometimes mention Judah the Maccabee, but we really don't talk about it. And what does it really mean? We don't talk about the fact that the reason why Judah rebelled was because the Seleucids were trying to remove us from our land, or they were trying to assimilate us. And so we fought a rebellion to keep our Judaism and stay in our land. And so what we do as Americans is we end up just relating Hanukkah to Christmas. And so now everybody believes that Hanukkah is like, oh, it's like Jewish Christmas, right? Because we open presents and everything of the sort. And it's not what it is. And so we need to tell our story better to ourselves in order to tell that story better to others. And going to what Heidi was saying, which is that how do you educate others? Like, at the end of the day, not every Jew can spend 3 hours of their day educating people, right? And so how do we reach the masses in a way that is evergreen? And in the same way that there are so many pieces of art now, right, that tell the story of, so many other minority groups that have not been told, we need to tell our story. What does it really mean to be a Sephardic Jew from Spain who now lives in Morocco? And what does it mean to be a Jew in the Ottoman Empire, right? Because you can tell it, right, in terms of expository, this, fact by fact, but not everybody wants to experience that. Sometimes you really do need something like a story, a book, or a short story, anything, some type of narrative that allows people to help almost subvert their understanding of what does it mean to be Jewish. And so then that way it hits both sides, so that we get better at telling our story to ourselves and to others when we do have the chance to do so. And that also we are constantly educating others through art.
Well, and when you said short story, I was like, ding, ding, ding. It has to be a short story because people have no attention spans. People cannot sit through anything. And when I've tried to educate, and I put that in quotes because I'm not an expert in Jewish history or Israel and its history, but the attention span is not there. If you don't put it out there in a paragraph, they're done. They've forgotten all about it. So it has to be short and concise and get to the point. But unfortunately, you cannot explain a history of over 5,000 years, right, from the beginning of time in a very short, concise little.
Well, what I'm hoping for is that with this, and that's kind of like what, again, the point of Sifria is to say, okay, there's a lot of people, the masses have short attention spans, which I do too. I have a short attention span as well. And I sit there on my phone while I watch, some type of background television. But when there's a really good TV show, like I'm just watching Shrinking with my wife,
I heard about that Shrinking.
It's amazing. It's incredible. And I will put, right.
Oh.
And I will put my phone down and I will watch it for 30 to 40 minutes because it is an incredible piece of art. And so the beautiful thing about art is that instead of going to the masses, it really does hit different audiences in different ways. And if you create enough different types of art, you actually do end up hitting the masses, and some that you think might be niche end up exploding, and you never know which one is going to be that thing, which is why it's important to just give every single piece of art the space for it to breathe, because there will be most people who need the short stories and who have the short attention spans, and that's what they need in order to be educated. But there's also going to be a ton of people who are willing to read a book, who are willing to watch an hour and a half, 2 hour long movie about an Orthodox woman in New York City. There are going to be people that do want to engage in that art, and you just never know what is going to make it. And so the best thing to do is just to invest in all of it.
Well, and unfortunately, more people will watch a Holocaust movie than the truth about how Israel was created, why it was created, what is Zionism, and that's the same thing that I think a lot of Black people have been saying for years. Why do we keep creating, slavery movies and shows and TV shows?
Really?
So much,
they don't want that?
They hate it.
They keep saying we're so much more than what happened to us, right? We're so much more than this a period of 250 years of whoever slavery was. And it's the same with us and the Holocaust, and some of these even words, I was thinking about it today, like I didn't grow up with the word Holocaust. That wasn't a thing in Soviet Russia, in the language that we have, because they lived it all, like my grandparents, and we never heard that word. That's an American word that was created, an English word. We didn't even hear about, like, even so many words that people don't even understand where they came from or how or why. And people don't really want to sit through anything but stuff like slavery and Holocaust. That's why we need more stories that are about our origin, our history, our just everything. I mean, how many amazing stories are out about Jewish authors and artists and painters and whatever, mathematicians. I mean, I remember watching some movie, and my son's friends were over, and they were like, "Oh, he was Jewish, and he was Oppenheimer," and I was like, "What?"
And what's really critical about that is the fact that that Oppenheimer being Jewish was so critical to his decision to be a part of the building of the bomb. And if you have certain people in charge of creative choices and they say, well, we want to tone down the Jewishness because, we don't want whatever, for whatever reason, right? But that was such an important part, not just of Oppenheimer, but of his entire team. And that's what Nolan elevated, which again, I didn't know. And again, there are so many stories in our own that are incredibly exciting that could all be turned into something. I mean, I'm listening to a book to Simon Sebag Montefiore wrote a book called Jerusalem, the biography, and it's literally a chronicling of Jerusalem. But instead of kind of event by event by event, he really focuses on the people, and he goes through the story of Jerusalem through the prism of following the people that are important and the leaders. And it's so fascinating to see this starting from beginning and going step by step. and you learn about all of these incredible people that we never hear about, that you have these incredible Jewish kings, these complicated, incredible
Right.
characters. Literally, they could be characters in a story. And
Yeah.
what would it be like to be able to take from our own history the way that the Greeks take from, and making a movie about Alexander the Great, or we always look to the Roman Empire and the Roman Republic to create some fascinating story, or we create some allegory about today based upon this. But what if we actually went to the Jewish story, to the story
Mm-hmm.
of the Jews, and to find those characters, and we pull it from that? And how does that then tell everybody else, oh, wait a minute, the Jews have an incredible history that goes
Right.
beyond Woody Allen, that goes beyond
Correct. The
Miami Bialik.
Holocaust.
Exactly. That goes
Exactly.
Yeah.
beyond the Holocaust. Exactly.
Right. And, it's so interesting because speaking of books, I found exactly that in the thoughts that we're going through as you were talking about when I was reading. Uh, do you know who David Baddiel is? He's a British comedian. Again, another Jewish guy that most people in America have never heard of. He's brilliant. His humor is very Jewish, very dark, sense of humor. He wrote a book called Jews Don't Count many years ago. Not many, it was probably about 10 years ago. And I remember my brother telling me about this book for years. And I was like, yeah, I'm not reading another book about my own people, right? Like, okay, it's the non-Jews need to read it. But he's a comedian, right? So people didn't take him seriously. The things that he talks about, I highly recommend everyone. And whenever there's discussions on social media, I'm like, read his book, you'll understand. Read his book. I cannot do justice to explain just the way he explains it to people, why Jews truly do not count in our society in terms of artistic endeavors and books and writing and anything and everything. And I'll give you an example. As I'm listening to it, part of it I listen to it, I normally just read a book, but we've all been there where we're reading a book, right? Whether it was a novel or biography, whatever it is. And there's a part, my husband calls it the Jew part, which means I'm either going to continue reading the book or the book's in the trash, because there's always inevitably, if it's a non-Jewish author, there's going to be an anti-Semitic part in a book. In every novel I have ever read, romantic novel, whatever, it's a non-Jewish author, and I was one of those people talk about being an ally to Black Lives Matter, to LGBTQ, every movement you can think of. I read every book by immigrants, by Black authors, Latin, everything we just talked about. And that was my mission in life for many, many years. I'm going to read non-white stories, non-white author stories. And I remember reading every time I'm reading this book, and there'll be something about the Jews. Either the Jewish character or characters are always very minor, right? Some kid on the side that Jew down the street, there'll be that comment, right? Or that jeweler down the street who rips everyone up, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, oh, that's it. The book's in the trash. I'm not going to continue reading this bullshit. But it's what he says is that people have made it okay for artists to continue to put this stuff out there, and agents and publishers and editors, and it's just what it is. This is what it is, and we just accept it. So we're always left out of the conversation no matter what. We're always just going to have to accept it, because what are we going to stop reading? We're going to stop going places. We're going to stop watching movies. We just accept it. And I highly recommend you both reading his book, because even me as a Jewish person, I was like, oh my God, I feel validated. I'm not the only one who wanted to burn these books,
Yeah.
So even the classics, some of the classic books.
Well, yeah, like my daughter she's in this Orthodox Jewish school that it's called Beis Yaakov, and they're all over the world, whatever. And they're doing Shakespeare. They're reading Shakespeare and having to memorize some lines from it. And I'm like, oh my God, he was such a raging anti-Semite. And then my daughter said, yeah, we actually talked about that with our teacher. And she's like, look, the truth is that if we ignored every single author who, wrote a classic, whatever, we'd have nothing to read, because
that's okay. Maybe it's okay.
Yeah.
but
But
it's
yeah,
not.
I read romance books also where somebody was like, oh, his name was like Andy Goldberg, and he was totally ripping us off, when we were trying to buy a house, and they just, you're right, like little snide remarks like that, and then I'm just like, okay, I'm done with you. But it's like, and I think Dave Chappelle has been making some very anti-Semitic skits recently,
for decades.
for decades.
We just
But
finally
can you
started.
imagine a Jewish comedian doing that for, like, to the Black community, or really just any other community? For some reason, it's so true. Like, Jews don't count. You're allowed. Society allows it to be okay to make fun of you.
Well, it's interesting, especially in this particular climate, because Jews are the only ones that nobody really cares if like non-Jews play us. Like I didn't realize that. Like I've never seen like Mrs. Maisel TV show, but like nobody in that show is Jewish, despite every character being Jewish. And I'm like, there are literally so many Jewish actors and actresses. Wouldn't it have made sense to like do that? Or for instance, there was another show also on Amazon, called Hunters, and it was all about, Nazi hunters, and everybody told me to watch it. It's like very cathartic being Jewish.
No, it's not true. There's so in Hunters, I thought the same. I found out the main kid, he is Jewish.
No, but that's not what the issue. That's not what I found the issue to be. My issue found was I was watching it for about 3 episodes, and by the time I got to the 3rd episode, my problem was how kitschy and stereotypical like every single thing was like, oh, hello, matzo, you want some matzo ball soup? And I'm like, guys, like that's not what Jews are. Like it was just one of those things where Jews are normal people in the same way that so many times, that Black people want to stop watching slavery movies, or movies about the civil rights movement, and they just want the same movies that white people get, but just with Black characters in them. There are Black people who live in the suburbs, there are Black people who like country music, so like what's the big deal if you have that? And in the same way as Jews, when I was like, a Jew can simultaneously want to, hunt Nazis without having a nasally voice. I'll drink and eat matzo ball soup for every single meal. And so that's, again, that's where I come from, this place of, how do we give everybody the story, the ability to say, there are some stories, for instance, like Heidi's with Unorthodox Love, and talking about somebody who has an actual experience being an Orthodox woman, who gets to who gets to speak about their life and their story from a place where they love it, right? There's a TV show, I think, called Unorthodox or something like that, where she leaves because, and the perception is that it's really culty and it's this really horrible thing. And it was a beautiful television show, but it also, if you don't know anything about the Orthodox community and that is your only window into it, you're going to think that they're like Scientologists and that they're like these crazy culty people. And that's not okay, because that is the foundation for which stereotypes are created. And that's how you get people being like, oh yeah, of course they like build tunnels and they're like rat people because this is who they are. And so you have to give people like Heidi the ability to tell a story from a place of love and admiration that is also somewhat complicated. And that's really what I hope Sifriya is, which is a place where people get to tell whatever story. They can tell really happy-go-lucky stories. They can tell really sad stories. They can hopefully tell stories that are a little bit of both. And that goes into everything. That goes into the story, because that's what the story of Israel and its people are, that of triumph and of downfall. And the story of even establishing the state of Israel is complicated. We are not the good guys 100% of the time, and that's okay, because nobody is ever the good guy 100% of the time. Nobody is the bad guy 100% of the time, and we need to be honest about that and give people the time and space to tell that story, though, not from a place of criticism, but from a place of love.
Well, I think it's a lot easier to do stereotypical stories, and it's a lot more entertaining, right? Apparently, to what, like all these shows. Remember, we talked about in the previous episodes, we talked about that TV show with, I keep wanting to say Seth Cohen, Adrian Brody from the OC.
Adam Brody, and not into that.
Nobody wants this.
Nobody wants
Oh,
this.
of course. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Show too. Nobody wants it. It was a great show.
It was a
They're
great
so
show,
stereotypical.
but
The Jewish, mother who, yeah.
exactly. And the thing is, yes, there are some Jewish women like that. My kids will say, that's me. I'm not. But my point is, not everybody is like that. My mother
I'm not like that.
completely.
I'm just like, honey, marry converts. Like we need more diverse blood in our gene pool.
Exactly. And it's not, the whole scene about the mother eating the salami or pastrami or whatever
Oh, the
what
bacon.
Yeah, the
bacon or whatever. Oh God, that was such a horrible, and I am not the most observant Jewish person, but that was such a slap in the face. It was so disgusting. I'm like, really? You couldn't have done something else to make this scene funny? Why did it have to be she's eating out of the trash, the salami or whatever? Anyway, we kept watching it, but I'm thinking, like you said, there's so many other stories that are not stereotypical, that are not, because not everybody is like that. I didn't grow up with stereotypes like this, because in Soviet Russia, the Jews were tough, and dude, they survived. Look at what they survived. My grandfather killed a person after the war, after coming back from the concentration camps. He found his Latvian neighbor who gave away his whole family to the Nazis, basically saying, here's my Jewish neighbor, go take him to the camps. Came back, picked up a 2x4 and beat him to death. We just
Thank
found
God.
out.
That's awesome.
I mean, it's
Again,
horrible.
where does that? That's a story.
That's
Write
a story.
that. Write that. That's what I'm talking about. Is that's the type of story that like we are not these, just like we are not Woody Allen. We are warriors. We were we rebelled against the Babylonian, or maybe we lost the Babylonians actually, but we fought wars against the Greeks. We fought against the Romans. We care deeply. We fought against the Arabs. Like, we win. We're warriors. We're fighters. And we are also all of these other things too. Like Woody, trust me, though, I've known plenty of Woody Allen Jews too, right? And I've known plenty of Bialik Jews too. But the point is that both of those things exist, and our job is to help tell all of those stories. But we need a place that actually A, is going to give a platform for all of those stories, and B, to give the people who want to write those stories from a place of love and, yes, like my grandfather beat his traitorous neighbor to death with a 2x4 because he deserved it. And you need somebody who wants to write that, and without making the Latvian, neighbor like this complicated person who, like, maybe this is such a tough decision. You're like, no, like that dude is evil for doing that, and we're going to make him a villain.
Yeah. Well, and I should connect you with my brother, because he's actually trying to write this,
Oh, interesting.
We just heard about it, but yeah, I'll connect you with him. But Heidi, sorry, you were going to say something. And
was I? I was just like, I'm just like so impressed with your grandfather. I mean,
it's
what
I should know, great grandfather. It was my great grandfather, because it was him and my grandfather were the only two people who survived. And my grandfather was, I think, like 17 or 18 when the Stalin basically gave the Baltic states, the Baltic countries, to Hitler, saying, don't invade Russia. You can have Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, the Baltic states. And he did anyway, obviously, but and the Russians, the Red Army, were leaving Latvia. And my grandfather, they pushed him into a train and said, dude, where are you going? Nazis are coming. They're marching in. And they took him away, and he spent the next 4 or 5 years in Siberia.
Wow.
Working in some whatever. But that's the other thing too, is we talk about these Holocaust stories. We don't talk about the fact that what the Russians did to the Jews after the war, during the war and after the war, because we were traitors to them. Where were you the last 4 or 5 years? Why weren't you fighting against the Nazis? Excuse me, I was in a fucking concentration camp, being starved to death, but they looked at Jews as traitors because they weren't there fighting. Right. Until everything was unearthed and they found out what was happening. Even though on my mom's side, my grandfather did serve in the Red Army, and he didn't tell anyone he was Jewish, because here I am fighting for my country, and nobody even knows I'm Jewish, because there's going to be that anti-Semitism he has to deal with while fighting Hitler. Like, where are those stories, right?
Exactly.
I've always found it so interesting when many years ago, I am somebody at the dog park. This is where I have all my cool conversations, is at the dog park. And somebody overheard me talking to somebody else, and I was saying how important it is for me to basically vote in politicians who I know will support the state of Israel. And then he looked at me and he goes, "But you're an American. Why you should have like America's interest first?" And I was like so taken aback, and that I'm like, as a Jewish, I think non-Jewish people don't understand the Jewish
The connection,
story, the experience.
yeah,
where like we know no matter what country we're in, no matter how much we love whatever country we're in, and how loyal we are to that country, in the back of our heads we know, you know what, it's only a matter of time before we're going to get kicked out, and we need a safe haven. Because there were so many Jews, that like my ancestors who were from Poland, let's say, and they felt so Polish, like they were Polish before they were Jewish.
right.
And what happened,
Right.
know what I'm saying, the pogroms, and they had to come to America because of that. And that's basically our entire existence is like that.
Yeah.
And I think if you're not Jewish, you just don't get it. And so that's like one reason why anti-Semitic people are like, oh, you can't trust Jews because
they're loyal to Israel first.
Exactly.
Yeah. But it's because out of survival, we have to know that we have a place to go to should the shit hit the fan, and that was another, the word you used, pogrom, which I remember my grandmother talking about it, but we didn't even really, it kind of originated because of what was happening, because pogrom in Russian literally means destruction, and so it was before the war what Jews had to deal with, and I would love to hear more stories about that and what was going on back then, but listen, we're approaching an hour and there's so much to talk about. I know we have so much more we could talk about, I think the biggest thing I want people to take away from this is that they should go to your website, Substack.
Yeah. So, so let me tell you real quick. So as a quick thing about what Substack is, it started out as a newsletter and it remains basically a platform that allows you to start your own newsletter in a flash. And the beautiful thing about what it has turned into is it has really created the opportunity for it to be the home of all of your content. You can connect it to your YouTube, you can connect it to your podcast, including Apple, Spotify, YouTube podcasts, like all of it. It's really, really powerful and it's really incredible. And it also has the opportunity to very easily add contributors to it and give people that place. And so what I want to say is, Gam Vagam, G-A-M, and then V apostrophe G-A-M, Gam Vagam is the name of it. I'm Z-E Silver on Substack. And if you are interested in writing, or if you have a song, if you have anything that is artistic, if you drew something and you want it to be shared, this is what this is for. And the first and foremost thing that I want to say is that at the end of the day, it's all about quality. It's never about the content itself. As long as the content is within the ethos and the values of Gam Vagam, and also it is of high quality, so make sure to put it through spell check, make sure that it sounds good and all that kind of stuff. But that's really what it's here for, is for you to feel like you have somewhere that you can be authentically Jewish. And the last thing that I will say is, if you are an ally of Jews, actually an ally of Jews, not a fake ally of Jews, those like that, oh yeah, I like Jewish people, but not those Zionists, right? If you are an ally and you feel like you also want to speak your voice in either expository or in a narrative way, and you would like it, that is what this is for. That is what this is for, is to allow you to tell your story and be authentic to you, where so many others in the cultural zeitgeist are not going to allow you, or they are going to constantly force you to be in their little box because you are too much of something. And that is not what we are here for.
Yeah. Thank you. Wow. That was you. I couldn't have said it better. So that's why I let my guests speak for themselves. I just give them a platform to explain. But thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. And I'm interested in being on there and
Of course,
sharing
you
these stories.
should. Yeah, you're a great
Please.
writer, Julia.
Yeah,
Julia wrote a
I
book.
try.
Did you know that, Zach?
I
Yeah. Yeah. Wait, I
It's
think
hilarious. I
it's
loved
sitting
her book.
next to your book,
Oh,
Heidi.
that's so sweet.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I never thought that it would be harder to get an agent for a novel than it is for the second thing that I'm trying to write, which is more about, the matchmaking industry. But, I'm hoping things will change. And if not, I think we all need to just become agents and publishers and publish these books and stories. I
Let me
mean,
tell you something. The success of the American Jewish community, the success of the American Jewish community is based entirely in the fact that they did not allow us to
right?
belong to any of their things. So we decided to go start our own. They didn't want us in their banks, so we started the bank. So we started Goldman Sachs and Lehman Brothers and all of the major banks. They didn't want us in their law firms, so we made our own law firms. They didn't want us in their country clubs, so sometimes we went
Start,
to our country.
start
Exactly. Everything that
movies,
they
the film industry, the
everything,
entire
fraternities,
entertainment industry.
sororities, we do it all, and
Yeah.
we end up successful.
Yeah,
That's
I'm
why
really
people
thinking.
hate us, I think. Like, you just can't win.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. And this is, it's my grandma used to give the worst advice, but it was funny and the worst. But it was also rooted in something the best, like it was like good, but it was bad at the same time. And she would say things like, well, Germans really wanted to kill Jews because they were just jealous of our language. And I'm like, well, Yiddish kind of German, like grandma, kind of backwards there, but okay. She's like, but then she would say, they're really just jealous of us. He was jealous of, and he couldn't make it in as an artist or this or as that. And there's really something to that, right? Like even Kanye with all his rants. I mean, look what's out there now. There's videos of him from decades ago saying, I am jealous of Jewish people. I am
Right.
jealous that they have a community. I'm jealous that they can start their own banks and everything we just talked about. So really at the end of the day, I think it all boils down to hatred, being scared of something, and being jealous. So we'll just have you on as our like local historian because you have a lot more knowledge about the
He
history, the
totally
background,
does.
right?
Yeah.
Well,
So
again, I'm learning myself. I just listened to Haviv Rediger on his new podcast about the history of the American Jews, and again, I didn't know really what it meant
yeah.
to have the start of the American Jewish community, which started when New York was still New Amsterdam. 16 Jews begged the governor to allow them to stay. And he allowed them to stay because they said, we promise we won't be a burden to you. So
Oh,
for every
wow.
Jew that stepped off the boat, they said, no, we got him. Don't worry about it. And the
Wow.
foundational experience of the American Jewish community and why our philanthropy business is so massive literally starts with 16 Jews saying, we will take care of our own. Don't worry about us. And
Right.
that is the seed. And that is the type of thing that I did not know and that so many others don't know. And
Yeah.
we need to start telling those stories.
Yeah.
Because
And
we
this
get
was,
hate for that too. They're like, the Jews only look out for each other. Sorry,
yeah.
Julia.
Is what it is.
Yeah.
You know what? And that's such a debunked thing. Well, I debunked it. I don't know what others, but I keep saying, you know how many people I know in the entertainment industry? Do you know how many people? Because my husband used to work in the entertainment industry. He used to make special effects and films and television. And how many of his friends that he has grown up with since they were like, toddlers, has any one of them reached out to me and said, "Hey, I want to turn your book into a movie?" And I've given them my book. I've bothered the shit out of them. I have called, I have emailed, I've sent them my scripts, I've sent them the actual books. I even, offered to cook for them. I've offered to
Oh,
pay. And do you, here I am. I still don't have a movie. I still don't have a TV series. So that whole thing about Jews help each other, yeah, sure, there may be some, right? If you're in a small knit little whatever entertainment Hollywood community, but maybe, but I've never seen it. Where's my money? Where's my generational wealth? Where's all of my, things are just not handed down. I keep turning to my husband every other day. I'm like, where the fuck is my generational wealth? I did one stand-up thing a while ago, and I talked about, my dad said, here's your generational wealth, and he was all Russian books. Here it is. This is your. I'm like, what the fuck did you bring Tchaikovsky in Russian to America for? I thought I could, sell it for money. Russian is in demand.
You can give me your book, and you can give me, I can't produce a TV show, but when it is, I'll be your distributor.
Awesome. You got it. I'm so doing this.
There you go.
There we go. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you guys both for joining and for talking to me. I feel like we could blab forever more about it. I'm sure we could do it again. So it was such a pleasure having you on, Zach, and Heidi, as always.
Thank you, Heidi. Thank you, Julia. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank
you guys. And enjoy listening to this. I hope everyone does enjoy, and go to his Substack. I kept calling it something else.
And I love Zach's TikTok.
Yeah.
Like, I was so upset when I'm like, well, now how am I going to watch the whole, the Shalom Chaverim? Like, that's just, you have to watch. I have to. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to put all the links in the description. Everyone will know where to go. I'm going to tag you and everything. Perfect. So thank you so much, guys, for joining me. It was such a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share. And even if you didn't enjoy it, share anyway. Thank you for listening, and come back to Someone Had to Say It.